Putting God first is not a religious act, it is a direct blow to the modern ego. This video reveals how to reorganize your life from the soul, not from appearances. Stay until the end to understand why, without an eternal purpose, all success eventually collapses. Many men try everything. They control their schedules, perfect their habits, multiply their efforts. They learn techniques, master routines, simulate strength. But there comes a point when the exhaustion is no longer physical, it is spiritual. Because even when everything on the surface seems to work, inside they still feel the same void. Nothing fills it. Nothing is enough. The external advances, but the internal quietly breaks apart. The root of that emptiness is not a lack of discipline, but disordered priorities. The mistake is not wanting to grow, but building without a foundation. And that foundation is not a new technique or a winning mindset. It is something deeper, more uncomfortable, more true. Putting God first is not a religious slogan or a spiritual cliché. It is a complete reconfiguration of the center from which one lives, not as a symbolic act, but as a governing principle. Because when a man places himself at the center of his own life, everything rests on his shoulders, his logic, his control, his strength, and that is admired by the world. But deep down, it is the perfect recipe for collapse, because no matter how much you achieve, if your purpose does not transcend yourself, everything becomes weak, fragile, unstable. Self-sufficiency is the ego's most elegant trap. When you put God first, the order changes not by obligation, but by truth. Your goals stop revolving around personal success and begin to respond to a mission greater than yourself. You no longer walk driven by validation, but by conviction. You no longer define yourself by what you achieve, but by what you build within. What once agitated you now dissolves, because peace is not born from control, it is born from direction. That is where a silent, but irreversible shift occurs. Your decisions no longer come from pressure or fear, but from clarity rising from within. It is not about becoming perfect. It is about walking with purpose, even when the path is not fully understood. When you put God first, the focus changes. You stop running to achieve and begin walking to obey. And that obedience does not slow you down, it gives meaning. It removes noise and gives fire. The man who lives with God at the center does not disconnect from the world, but neither does he submit to it. His roots are not in others' opinions, but in an unseen force that sustains everything. That kind of strength makes no noise, yet it transforms, because it does not come from an inflated ego, but from a soul that stopped seeking applause and began seeking truth. There is no longer anxiety to prove anything, only faithfulness to the path. No urgency to control, only firm surrender to a higher direction. That direction reshapes how one acts, speaks, and thinks, because when God comes first, everything is cleansed, everything aligns. Many men fail not because they lack ability, but because they built on unstable ground. Talent is not enough without direction. Strategy is useless without eternal vision. Productivity does not save if it is sustained only by willpower. That is why so many reach great heights and still feel empty. They moved forward, yes, but without knowing where they were going. And when you don't know where you're headed, any success becomes a gilded cage. Putting God first does not eliminate challenges, but it turns you into someone who knows why he endures them. And when you know the why, the how stops crushing you. You no longer need everything to make sense, because you know everything is part of something greater. Sometimes you wait, sometimes you advance, sometimes you let go, but you do not react from desperation. You act with temperance, because emotions no longer govern you. You are guided by a compass that does not depend on circumstances. That inner compass cannot be bought. It is built in silence, in daily surrender, in the decision not to move without direction. When that becomes habit, your steps gain weight. You no longer improvise your life, you live it intentionally. Your time is no longer a sequence of urgent tasks. It becomes a space where the eternal is planted. Your energy is no longer wasted on pleasing others. It is channeled into serving. Asterisk the man who puts God first learns to say no. No to noise, excess, the obsession with being right, the hunger for approval. He learns to say yes only to what builds from within. His criterion is no longer convenience, but coherence. He no longer moves by impulse, but by conviction. And that conviction does not make him rigid, it makes him firm, because it does not depend on the moment. It depends on purpose. Asterisk, and that purpose, when it is born from the divine, does not change with the seasons. It remains, even when everything around seems to collapse, and that is what sets him apart. While the world trembles, he remains. Asterisk remaining is not resisting out of pride. It is walking firmly because you are no longer supporting yourself alone. Because when God is first, you stop relying solely on your limited logic. It is not about canceling your mind, but recognizing its limits. Your vision, no matter how sharp, cannot see the whole. Your strength, no matter how admirable, is not enough to sustain the gray days. But when you are aligned with something greater, even setbacks make sense. Asterisk putting God first is not weakness. It is order. It is the courage to recognize that you are not the center of the universe, that your story does not revolve around your desires, but around a calling, and that calling will not always be comfortable, clear, or immediate. Sometimes it will ask you to pause when you want to run, to release what you love, to renounce an image the world applauds in order to embrace a truth few understand. Asterisk, that act is not simple. It requires surrender, and surrender is not giving up out of exhaustion. It is acting with humility. It is accepting that your plans, no matter how brilliant, can mislead you, that your ambitions, no matter how great, can empty you, that your dreams, if not aligned with the eternal, become golden cages that eventually suffocate. The ego demands control. God asks for trust, and in that tension, who you really are is revealed. Asterisk the man who puts God first does not need to be perfect, needs to be obedient. He no longer lives to accumulate. He lives to impact. He no longer climbs aimlessly. He chooses every step with intention. He does not need recognition to validate his path. He knows his identity is not built with titles or numbers. It is forged in silence, in coherence, in daily faithfulness to the invisible. Asterisk, when the soul is ordered, everything else finds its place. Your relationships are purified. You no longer use others as means to your ends, you see them as part of the plan. Your leadership changes. You stop imposing and start inspiring. You do not manipulate to serve. You do not shout, you sustain. You do not seek followers, you form people, because you understood that authority does not come from position, but from integrity. Asterisk, and when the difficult moment comes and it always does, you do not collapse, because your roots are not in success, they are in obedience, because your peace does not depend on results, but on the certainty that you are in the right place, doing the right thing, even if no one applauds. That kind of peace cannot be faked. It shows in the eyes, in the tone of voice, in the way one inhabits the world. Asterisk the man who walks this way leaves a mark, not because he wants to stand out, but because he lives with a truth that burns. He does not chase the clock. He advances with steady steps. He does not negotiate his essence. He does not forget who guides him. And all of this begins the day he makes one decision to stop being the center and put God first. From there, his life does not only have direction, it has eternal purpose. Asterisk your real change does not begin with a goal, but with a silent surrender. If this message touched something in you, subscribe, activate the bell, like the video, and don't miss our next one. Comment which part impacted you the most. Asterisk, asterisk.